I could never get my secretary to admit that she was a Nordic, okay? And everybody knew it, but she wouldn't accept. But from what she would drop into conversations, essentially, she was a part of the Nordic Navy, like a commander in intelligence with a mission to support a specific program, the Apollo program, and support all of it, not just first phase to go to the moon, but second phase to build Navy stations on all of the planets that were habitable or their moons in the solar system, and then build bases on all of the 12 closest stars. That was the Apollo mission. Now, the two girls in engineering, the two Nordics, never in any way of that 4 years came up with anything that would bother the mission to be accomplished. They were constantly pushing everybody to the side who were trying to stop the program from being implemented, cover it up, change information, do it wrong, everything, all the way through the 4 years. So we ended up, we roughly did 4 years, I roughly did 4 years in the Navy, and I roughly did slightly less than 4 years on Apollo. Now, part of my 4 years on Apollo was on Nova trucks. And the Nova trucks were like 8 times the size of the Apollo, 10 times the size, depending on what you were. And they were trucks to haul all of the facility equipment that we needed to build a 20,000-man Naval Station Research Center on the moon. That's what we were supposed to be doing. The mission to the moon was to build these facilities. And all we did was get to the moon, and some guys gave us the finger and told us, don't come back. Okay, go ahead and finish a couple of 3 more of your missions and don't come back. Well, these were the reptilians. So they were already there. We didn't know that. And essentially, we got stopped a third way through the missions. Now, the Nordic people, what are they here for, and who are they? And we didn't learn till much later. There's boxes full of Nordics. Okay, we got a whole box full of them, like maybe 100 different types. And we know now, but back then, we just thought of one. The 2 young ladies represented the Nordic civilization. And my girl turned out to be a Nordic Navy lieutenant commander with a specific contract and a specific mission to get the Apollo program implemented, the whole program. So you have to say that that group that she supported from out in the galaxy were the greatest thing that could happen to the planet. Never did she ever come up with anything that threw cold water on any part of the program. She was always way ahead of everybody with how to fix it. And she telepathically, continually, threw stuff in my head. Don't let them go that way. Bill, you know what we talked about. You gotta fix it. And I have to say I never had any type of relationship with a person like her till I got over to North American and then over to TRW. And those girls also refused to say that they were Nordics. But they, again, were doing exactly the same thing as my secretary at Douglas on the Apollo. They were pushing. Those girls had 2 of them at North American. The one, I got into my secretary, administrative assistant in TRW. So there, again, you're getting support from an individual that is probably part of the Nordic Navy, implementing an agenda again. They were at war with the reptilians, way out there. And Solar Warden, of course, was our portion of that war. And they were also at war with the insects, the praying mantis, people, if you want to call them that. And so we were fighting two of the really bad people. Collectively, we were going to be fighting with them, which the Nordics were already doing. And the Nordics had lost one massive battle between their planet and another planet, which the reptilians had, and restructured again, and then we're back at war again. And we're talking about a whole lot of things that were elements in who are the Nordics. Who are these guys?
All right, now, this is getting very interesting because we're starting to cross over into a lot of the areas that you folks have said are the things that you want us to talk about the most. And so we're going to just tear right into this thing. Now, first of all, it was very interesting that he talked about the Apollo missions having phases and that only phase 1 was landing. He talked about them building trucks and that there was a separate launch site for these trucks and that their goal was to actually build these 20,000 person bases, first on the moon, then on other planets and their moons, and then 12 stars around our solar system. That's a lot of information, and I just want to get your take on that before we go into all the rest of it.
Yeah, I may actually have visited one of those.
One of what?
Those installations in another star system.
Ah.
When I was taken through the portal to that moon that was around this gas giant that I described.
Right.
So this could be one of those bases in one of the local 13 stars.
Now, he said that the reptilians told us to buzz off when we got to the moon, and that on the overt level, the Apollo missions were not continued. But it definitely appears on a covert level that they were, and this might be one area in which Tompkins and the intel that he got hasn't given him the full perspective on what really happened. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah. The information is always going to be skewed and elements redacted.
Now, he's talking about a Nordic Navy, and he gave us some very interesting information. It was a little awkwardly worded maybe for some, but he talked about there being a box of people, and that he said within the box we ultimately found out that there were 100 different types of Nordics. Is that consistent with anything that you've heard?
The number isn't. I don't remember hearing that specific of a number, but yes, there were many different types categorized, and they were slightly different in size and stature. There was even one group that they were calling Nordics for a while, but they have the Nordic look, that they're about 8 feet tall, have a big forehead, and 6 fingers. And they were putting them in that category for a while. So, you know, that happens just like there are tons of different beings out there that look similar to what we call the gray.
Now, he describes that these Nordics had a navy, and that the woman that was working with him as his secretary or administrative assistant when he goes over to TRW, that in either case they had a command designation within that military structure. Is this consistent with anything that you've heard, that they have a sort of militarized structure to their organization?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and also with the inner Earth groups I was interacting with, you know, seeing that you know, their pilots that piloted the craft that we rode on to the Kuiper Belt and Venus were very military type.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they said they have, you know, their military groups or scientific groups. They don't all mesh together.
Now, he describes a war that was being fought between the Nordics and the reptilians. And I thought one of the really interesting things that he dropped on us was that there was a planet that the Nordics actually lost in this war, because apparently there was an adjacent planet controlled by the reptilians, and they were fighting over this area. The Nordics lost that war and then had to regroup, and that apparently part of their regrouping was coming here and working with us.
That was it, probably one operation or mission out of their regrouping.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long has this war gone on? Has it been an ongoing war with the Nordics for, let's say, tens of thousands of years?
I really don't know how long they've been fighting, but I do know that there are wars out there that have been fought with the reptilians and their allies, and they've conquered planets. And one of the groups that works with the reptilians is a Nordic-looking being that I described earlier with the big forehead and the 6 fingers. And all the intelligence was that they were a conquered race that was forced to work.
All right, now let's get right down into this idea of Nordics actually appearing within the military-industrial complex and taking on essentially support jobs, but telepathically influencing people at those jobs. Is it possible that these Nordics could actually be doing this? Could they actually appear on Earth and get these jobs and get the security clearance necessary to be in these positions?
Yes, yeah. There are a number of them living on the surface of the Earth right now, walking among us.
A number of them? Like as in how many would you say?
I don't know. I mean, it's from different groups.
Okay.
Anshar told me of thousands of years ago, one of the factions within their conglomerate of groups was banished to the caverns towards the surface and the surface of the planet.
Really?
Yeah.
How would one of these Nordic men or women be able to get into such a highly compartmentalized, highly classified thing? Wouldn't our government or the military-industrial complex be highly afraid of them because of the possibility of them either deceiving us or bringing intel back to their own group and then weaponizing it against us?
Yeah, and after a while they found out that we were being deceived about some things that the Nordics, or that we're calling them, did for operational security. You know, there were definite some deceptions that were given to us. But for the most part, they were learning about the reptilian threat and the threat of their allies. And this group looks a lot like us. You know, basically it's like a cousin coming to help a cousin.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, yeah. But these people presented themselves as wanting us to get rid of our nukes, wanting us to become more loving and peaceful, and they did not see as big of a threat from them as they did their enemy, the reptilian groups.
One of the things that Tompkins is going into that's different from what you've said is he seems to be portraying these Nordics, at least in this part of the interview, as being essentially from outer space, from other worlds. So what do you think is really going on here? Is this...
Well, it's a mixture.
Okay.
So I don't know what group he was in contact with. He could very well have been in contact with a non-terrestrial group.
Okay.
But the groups that I had contact with that fit this description claim to be created on this planet naturally, and that this is their home.
Now, Corey, I want to get into something that's a really sensitive, personal thing for you, and that everybody who's watched the show, it's their favorite episode, and that is when you had this mind meld with Kari, the priestess of the inner earth, and you reach out your hands to her hands. She offered you some kind of beverage that you declined. You didn't want to drink the drink.
The elixir of Isis.
Let's just talk a little bit about what she showed you, and does that corroborate in any way with what Tompkins just told us in this interview?
Yes, and she was connecting with me to focus on one small period in my youth. And as we regressed in the mind meld to that time, I was seeing her life too, throughout the same time periods,
right,
you know, or her age that matched mine. And one of the things that I saw was a series of meetings that she had with military types. The suits looked, the material looked 40s, 50s era, and she was speaking with Russians, with English, Canadian, United States, representatives of the military.
Wow.
And assisting them, and they said that they assist them psychically, they assist them with some technology. So yeah, there's definitely some crossovers.
All right, so now we're going to have another clip for you, and this is getting into some really interesting stuff in which Tompkins is going to be describing his own experience of understanding that abductions are taking place, and we're also going to hear him describing what he knows personally about the inner earth. And this stuff absolutely blew my mind because, Corey, there was some things he says here we're going to see that even go farther than what you've said to me before, and it rocked my world. So check it out. You're going to love this.
I could never get my secretary to admit that she was a Nordic, okay? And everybody knew it, but she wouldn't accept. But from what she would drop into conversations, essentially, she was a part of the Nordic Navy, like a commander in intelligence. And there were trucks to haul all of the facility equipment that we needed to build a 20,000-man naval station research center on the moon. That's what we were supposed to be doing. The mission to the moon was to build these facilities. And all we did was get to the moon, and some guys gave us the finger and told us, don't come back. Okay, go ahead and finish a couple of 3 missions with a mission to support a specific program, the Apollo program, and support all of it. Not just first phase to go to the moon, but second phase to build Navy stations on all of the planets that were habitable or their moons in the solar system, and then build bases on all of the 12 closest stars. That change information, do it wrong, everything, all the way through the 4 years. So we ended up, we roughly did 4 years, I roughly did 4 years in the Navy, and I roughly did slightly less than 4 years on Apollo. Now, part of my 4 years on Apollo was on Nova trucks. And the Nova trucks were like 8 times the size of the Apollo, 10 times the size, depending on what you were, was the Apollo mission. Now, the 2 girls in engineering, the 2 Nordics, never in any way of that 4 years came up with anything that would bother the mission to be accomplished. They were constantly pushing everybody to the side who were trying to stop the program from being implemented, cover it up.